guys, this is Max Steinberg with SaberSim. I am just starting to build my lineups and do adjustments for today's slate. And I just wanted to show you how I use SaberSim to build my lineups by using all the tools they have that allow me to adjust projections and adjust ownerships, and then show you how I use our lineup builder, which is really cool and has some really unique features that you're actually just not going to really find with other lineup builders. So I just want to show you all of that, show you my process a little bit, and see if I can teach you a little something about how to maybe use Saber a little better. So the first thing I'm going to do is start making player adjustments, fantasy point adjustments. And SaberSim does everything from the standpoint of a mathematical model, and sometimes that model is going to miss things that are kind of hard to incorporate. And I think one thing that it's going to miss a little bit today is the case of Dany Salazar. So Dany Salazar has not actually pitched in the pros for about a year and a half. He's coming off a rotator cuff surgery. And usually when this happens, I like to look and see if I can find any info on how his fastball is doing or how he looked. And doing the research, it seems like he's topping out at about 93 miles per hour. And if you actually look at Dany Salazar historically, last year his fastball averaged about 95. And, you know, that number 93 could be inflated from those minor league numbers. So that actually worries me a lot. He's also on a pitch count. So one thing I'm going to do here is just lower his projection because I just don't want any part of him at all. I don't even want a chance getting a chance. And then I'm going to also raise Houston's team projection by a little bit. And that's one thing that I really do like about Saber is you can actually just adjust teams on a team level instead of just using every individual player and going, you know, and typing in Jordan Alvarez and trying to get his projection up and then going George Springer. You know, if this is just a pitcher thing, it's really cool to just be able to be like, okay, this whole team's going to do better, and just do it like that. So I do that. I click apply changes. And then if you look at their projections after this, you're going to see George Springer is boosted. You're going to see Carlos Correa is boosted. Basically every single person on the team is going to be boosted, which is pretty great. And it's accomplishing exactly what I wanted to accomplish. So that's just a really easy way you can adjust guys based on their team projection, based on some information like this that our model's not going to capture. Another thing that our model might not capture is when there's some sort of pitch change or organizational change that's making a pitcher better and we're kind of underrating him. And I think that's going on with the Baltimore pitcher, Asher Wojciechowski, if I'm pronouncing that right. He added a cutter going to the Baltimore organization. But I think Baltimore is a really good organization. They have a lot of guys from Houston. And he's been doing a lot better. And I believe with that added cutter and going to the Baltimore organization that he's definitely going to perform better than we expect. And I just don't think our model's taking this into account. And if you actually look at line movements, I like using Vegas Insider to look at line movements. Our model likes Toronto here. Yet this line has went from Toronto minus 118 to Baltimore minus 110. So that shows me that despite the fact our model likes something, the sharp money is moving this line towards Baltimore, which really makes me believe what I'm seeing about Wojciechowski. And a lot of people I really respect are talking highly about him on Twitter. So I'm going to raise his projection a little bit, and I'm going to lower Toronto as a whole about a half a run. So I'm going to apply those changes. And, you know, this might increase Wojciechowski a little more than I like, because obviously if Toronto is going to score less, he's probably going to do better. So we account for that. But it looks like when I make those changes, it really just ignores the pitcher change, which is fine. But one distinction I want to make here is Wojciechowski is really good against righties because of this cutter, but he's he's historically pretty bad against stolen bases, and I like using these things on Baseball Savant. I love stolen base matchup. It's one of my favorite things to take into account. And his catcher is Chance Sisco, who has one of the worst pop times in baseball, just really bad against stolen bases. And I think this is just a great matchup in that respect. So I actually do really like the base stealers on Toronto, and there are two that are standing out to me, and they're the first two hitters in the lineup. One is Bo Bichette, who hasn't stolen any bases this year, but he's only had 14 plate appearances and is really known for his speed, and he's leading off. Another one is Cavan Biggio, who does steal bases. He's eight stolen bases, none caught stealing. Batting at the top of the order, we could see things that are like double steal type things here out of both these guys. And so I just really like the matchup there. So I'm actually going to go back, especially with Biggio, he's a lefty, and actually boost Biggio back and boost Bichette back a little bit. And I think this is going to just quantify this situation a lot better. So and also a lot more quickly and more precise. So just one thing I just really like here is, I'm lowering them on a team level. I'm raising the specific guys that I want, and we're all doing it in a way that's very, like, what's the word for it? Specific, like quantifiable. I'm not just like randomly throwing around numbers. I'm not randomly with my hands trying to figure out who to raise this much and who to lower this much. I'm lowering them on a team level, which matches what Vegas thinks more, and then specifically raising these guys. So I just really do like the preciseness of that. The last thing I'm going to do has actually nothing to do with projection. It has to do with ownership. So one thing that I do really like about SaberSim is it actually allows you to adjust ownership as well as projection. And I think what's something that's clear here is Asher Wojciechowski is probably going to be a little higher on than we think because we're under projecting him. And I actually agree with this Jack Flaherty ownership. I think that makes sense. I think with Dany Salazar, I don't think anyone's going to own him, so we lower him. And there's not that much to do with ownership here, but I do like having this option quite a bit because sometimes I do really disagree with what we're doing. But in this case, I actually think this is really accurate. So I guess the last thing I want to do is I feel like we're a little low. If you just look at innings projections for Trent Thornton, I do think we're a little low on his innings. And he's gotten crushed recently, but he does have some historical numbers of going big batters face. So I'm going to raise him a little bit. And I also think Andrew Kashner is actually really, really underrated here. I like the Boston organization quite a bit for developing pitching. And I just think that he's just not going to be that same person that people are expecting. So I'm actually going to lower Tampa Bay a little bit here too. And because I just don't think they're going to perform as well. And they probably are going to be higher owned than I expect to, because people see Andrew Kashner and they just think, oh, stacking against this guy is terrible. But I actually don't think he's that terrible. So we've made our adjustments. We made a few ownership adjustments. And, again, I think ownership is actually one of the most important things here. And luckily, Saber actually has a pretty accurate ownership model. And I think it's great that it's showing such accurate numbers here. And sometimes, though, I'm going to disagree with the model just because of some certain factors, and I like having that ability to adjust. So now we're going to go to building lineups, and we're going to say new build. And so this probably looks pretty familiar for you if you've used a lineup builder before. We have a bunch of pretty familiar settings. I like setting min salary as low, because I think you can make optimal lineups with leaving quite a bit of money on the table. We're going to do large slate default, and we have stacking rules like you'll find probably other places. But what I like about Saber is we're actually using correlations from the simulations. We have very accurate correlations because what we do is we simulate every game 10,000 times and then see how players are actually correlated. And a lot of times what lineup builders will do is they'll just try to incorporate correlation by making stacking rules, which we have, but you actually don't really need them with us because we're actually going to accurately build your lineups based on those optimal correlations, whereas other places just don't have those correlations to build on. And if they do, they're probably based on historical numbers and they're just not going to be as accurate. So on DraftKings, actually, when I'm building lineups, I actually like to limit the stacks to only 4 players from each team. And the reason I like to do this is we're going to take correlation into account perfectly. And I like the lineup differentiation you get from doing, 4 stack with like a couple of 2 stacks or like 3, 3, and 2. And RBIs and runs are just not as important on DraftKings as they are on FanDuel. DraftKings, they're only worth 2 points, whereas the single's worth 3, whereas on FanDuel, a single and a walk is worth 3, but an RBI and run's worth over 3. So I actually like to limit the stacking to make it only 4 stacks and then set this correlation to a very high number and just say, okay, maximize correlation, just make sure we're only getting 4 stacks. Ownership fade is our way of just accounting for ownership. And obviously, this is a 6-game slate. There's not a lot of teams. I think this is really important. So I'm going to set it to very high. And then smart diversity. I think this is a really cool thing that we incorporate. So a lot of what we do is based on the fact that we have a simulator and we're simulating the games. And so we really want to optimize for, those high expectation performances, those performances that just win you a GPP. And what smart diversity does is it says, okay, every time that our builder is building a lineup, we're going to just take a few simulations from each game and we're going to see what the highest outcome of those few simulations we choose are. And by doing that, we're really just maximizing for upside in a very cool way. So if you set this really low, it's going to use a lot of simulations for each lineup, maybe hundreds. But if you set this very high, it's going to use probably 2 or 3 simulations per lineup. And it will randomly choose lineups each time. But it's really going to account for, okay, what is really going to happen on tonight's slate? And how can I maximize my lineups, maximize for variance in a way that's going to win me that GPP, because that's obviously, that's what we're going for. We want to win these GPPs. So I'm going to start building my lineups. And by the way, one thing I just want to note, I'm just going to make 50 lineups. And I think this is something that a lot of people kind of just, they think of MME and they go, oh, these pros have such an advantage. They're entering 150 lineups. They are maximizing their chances of winning. There's no way I can stand a chance. But I think that's really, really faulty logic. And in fact, especially on slates like this, when there's only 6 games, I don't think it's smart to just max out the low stakes tournament. I think you're running the risk of having some minus EV lineups, extra lineups in those tournaments, which is really, really bad. So I'm actually just going to make 50 lineups tonight. And I just think that's the better move. And so as this is building, I just want to describe something that you're going to see when these lineups are built. And you see right here in Saber score. So right here it says filter by Saber score. And you're wondering, well, what does that mean? So a lot of lineup builders, they optimize for average projection. And they say, here's all the lineups that have the highest average projection. But for tournaments, that isn't really what we want. We don't want to optimize for the highest average projection. We want to optimize for ownership, lowest ownership combination. We want to optimize for upside. We want to optimize for correlation. And Saber score is our combined version of all this stats. So now we have our exposures, and one cool thing that SaberSim does once you build your lineups that I really, really like is I requested 50 lineups to be built, and what we end up getting is actually 1,000 lineups. So it has our 50 lineups right here and has exposure for that. But because we've actually built 1,000 lineups, I now can adjust my lineups a little bit here. So let's say I was talking about how I like those 3-3-2 stacks. Well, we have about 8% of those. Why don't I just raise that to 12? I'm going to add 2 more of those. 3-2-2 stacks. I want more of those. I'm going to raise that to 8%. So you can actually adjust these numbers. Maybe, I'm not really liking how much Cubs we got. And, damn, I forgot that the Cardinals actually have a really sweet bullpen. I don't really like them here as much, and I wish I took that into account a little better. Okay, well, I'll just lower their exposure to about 34%, and so now I have less Cub stacks. I was talking about how I didn't love Tampa Bay as much. I did lower them, so I'm just going to actually trust this and just hope that their ownership isn't as high as I think. And it's actually pretty balanced given, there's only 6 teams on the slate, so we're going to basically stack everyone. And so having, some beggars can't be choosers. I don't want to just have 80% exposure to one team. So it's actually pretty balanced here. And then, if there's anyone on a cap that I'm getting too much exposure to, maybe there's too much Kershaw, I can adjust this max exposure and only get 50%. Maybe I don't trust Lester and I want to lower him, but I usually just trust what comes out for the most part. And if something's really screwed up or something doesn't look right to me, not screwed up, but doesn't look right to me, then I'm really going to maybe go back, look at what I did, and if everything looks good, I might make some small adjustments. But that is basically it. And, I love the way you can adjust these things here. It happens really fast. And when you're done, you're done. Download CSV, upload to DraftKings, and you have your lineups. So that's just a little bit of the process of what I do when I'm building lineups and making my lineups for a day in DFS. Sometimes when I have more time, I'll do more research and make more small adjustments. But I really love how Saber just has a great baseline for projections for me to work off of, and a lot of times I just feel comfortable using what they have. I really hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned about some of the tools here at SaberSim, and if you have any questions for me, feel free to tag me at MaxJSteinberg on Twitter, ask me anything you want, and hopefully I'll be doing a few more of these. So thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time.